I chickened out. I let my anxiety over roller coasters to stop me from going to Great America with my classmates at the Stern School as a freshman. Stewart Hall High School adheres to the goals and criteria of the Sacred Heart education. Sacred Heart schools were founded by St. Madeleine Sophie Berra in the early 1800s. St. Rose Philippine Duchesne brought the schools to the United States in 1818. Goal 5 states that Schools of the Sacred Heart commits itself to educating personal growth in an atmosphere of wise freedom. And it was this element of a Sacred Heart education that helped me to conquer my fears and the infamous Mount Sac cross-country race. Upon transferring to Stewart Hall High School, I joined the cross-country team. I did well in my first race, but I didn't know what I was getting myself into. But then I lost my motivation when I became sick and injured. Everyone was excited about the upcoming Mount Sac race in LA and a visit to Disneyland, but I was dreading it. This was to be my first trip alone, and I got anxious that my teammates would misbehave or that I'd fall behind in schoolwork. As my anxiety built up, I began talking to our counselor, Mrs. Pomeranz, but my endurance was low and I didn't feel up to challenging myself. On my first race back on October 11th, I did much worse. I had fallen into the pleasure trap, as explained in a documentary we watched in Justice called Forks Over Knives. As described in the movie, all animals focus on the evolutionary goals of surviving and passing on one's genes. That means avoiding pain and doing everything with the least amount of effort. Pleasure-seeking, pain avoidance, and energy conservation really sum up animal behavior. The next day, I was so anxious that my parents sent an email to Mr. Marquette asking if I could stay home. But the dean urged me to go on the trip because the school wanted me to stretch outside my comfort zone, evidence of Goal 5's influence. There seemed to be no escape, but help was on the way. As part of her effort to bring me out of my gloomy state, Miss Pomeranz brought in Mr. Buckley, my coach, for a conference with me. He reminded me that it was healthy preparation for life to do something scary. My teachers were doing something for me similar to what was mentioned by William Byron in his 10 Building Blocks of Catholic Social Teaching, which we read in Justice. Discussing the difference between principles and values, Byron states that the former has a leads to implication, while values, once internalized, will prompt people to act consistently with what they consider to be valuable. My teachers had already internalized the principle of personal growth as a value, having gone to such great lengths to get me to go on the trip. To boost my confidence, I was also allowed to share a room with a few guys Mr. Buckley knew would not cause trouble. Later at practice, I opened up about my anxious and unmotivated feelings with my veteran teammates. They offered me consolation, telling me how they had felt similarly in the past, and reminding me, to my surprise, that we only had 3 races before the end. With that in mind, I boarded the bus next morning to meet my challenge, ready. Mount Sac was, as of course I had expected, very hot. Very dry. Very hilly. And very painful. But I knew that the end was in sight, so this was a challenge worth pushing through. After 20 minutes of suffering, I finally sprinted past the finish line, dizzy and panting. This moment was my turning point. Later we learned that we had done very well, and I enthusiastically cheered for our team. I still see a pattern of our teachers trying to nudge us outside our comfort zone so we may grow. I certainly learned from my race at Mount Sac that I was able to conquer my anxieties, and also that my teammates were willing to aid me through my troubles. This fits the Goal 5 criteria that students grow in self-knowledge and develop self-confidence as they learn to deal realistically with their gifts and limitations, and that students show concern for themselves and for others. Through Mount Sac, I came to a realization similar to the character John in the novel Brave New World, which we read in world literature. John, who believes in suffering for future gain, argued with the leader Mustafa Mond, who says that society has eliminated everything painful. John responds, "You got rid of them." Yes, that's just like you, getting rid of everything unpleasant instead of learning to put up with it. I came close to getting rid of my challenge, but the school intervened on my behalf knowing that I needed this experience, and I found that I was much stronger than once thought. And so it is to Goal 5 of the School of the Sacred Heart that I credit my ability to conquer the Sac.